Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BSF Canada, and Syngenta Canada.
Hi, I'm Bohner Tobin. Welcome to the Soybean School. We have a real treat today to kick off our 2024 season. Last fall, I hooked up with Horst, Bohner, and Rob Templeman, the two men who have led OMAFRA's soybean research extension efforts for the past 35 years. They met at Templeman's farm in Staffa, Ontario, to discuss the evolution of residue management in soybeans. They say there are opportunities to do straight no-till, but often a little tillage can help achieve those top yields. Here's that conversation.
Rob, it's a real pleasure to be with you here today. We're at your farm. You farm with your two sons close to Staffa. And when we're looking at these beans right here just outside the shop, gorgeous looking beans, tall, and we expect a real nice yield here. And of course, in this field, you've done the old twin row situation. And Rob, a lot of guys are still fighting with corn residue when they have big corn crops. So why have you gone down this road of twin rows?
Well, we struggle with residue, and now corn yields are even higher.
Right.
Once you get over 200 bushel corn yields, you've got a lot of residue to deal with.
Right.
And my experience with no-till over the years has been the further I can be away from the residue, the better my stand's going to be. And we like to plant soybeans inside those both rows and no depth wheels on the corn stalks, so that it's got a nice clear track. So we have a planter converted to 7.5 inch spacing, twin rows, and so we had to do some modifications. There's a special tongue on it. Everything had to be shifted, but other than that, it's pretty well stock. And 7.5 inch rows right between the rows. We use RTK for guidance, so we can run pretty well right down the center all the time. And we have had essentially no problems with stands since. Our depth is consistent because we're not running on the stalks or root balls.
And that's straight no-till. You're not doing any pre-tillage there?
Straight no-till and corn stalks.
Okay,
straight no-till.
And so when you're seeding those beans in the spring, then you're able to, because of the RTK, stay right off the corn rows, and you feel that is really what's helping you out in terms of keeping with true no-till. Because we still have guys, you know, that are getting 250 bushel corn now, right? And they say, I just can't do it anymore with all this residue. Right. But what's really interesting in this field is that now we're close to harvest. There's not a lot of residue left here when you look down the row, eh?
Not too much. Enough to know that it was a corn crop.
Yeah, but that's about it.
That's about it.
It's kind of disappeared largely.
That was a good yielding corn, and last year you would have looked like there was residue everywhere, but we find all the small residue, the small stems, all that by spring is almost irrelevant. And the only thing we're worried about is the coarse stem at the ground and the root balls. And we're not playing with them. We just leave them. And we roll it after. It knocks them down. And we have no problem at harvest. And it's the simplest route we've been able to get to for soybeans to give us a consistent good yield.
Okay, so now when we're looking at this machine here, this is a Kinsey machine, and you're doing the twins. You're also planting your corn with this machine. How do you, some guys get frustrated with this twin rows situation and then planting corn. How do you guys handle that?
Well, with corn, we of course lock up the front gangs, so we just have the rows at the back, plant corn, and then we can put an offset into our RTK, which keeps us on line at 30 inches all the way across. And so we don't have to run the markers and play with them all the time, because it does shift the planter over without the twin row at the front planting. But it does. Our biggest concern about planting corn and beans with the same planters, the corn units are getting corn acres plus they get the bean acres as well. So we try and keep track of the acres planted so we can keep the wear under control and keep everything in good shape. So, and the boys are good at that.
You have a little different rotation here. Corn, soybeans, wheat, followed by beans again, either edibles or soybeans. And in that scenario, you also still use the drill sometimes. You've got a 1590 John Deere drill. Let me ask you first, Rob, are you comfortable planting, or seeding rather, right into corn stalks, big corn stalks with that 1590 drill? Or is the answer, hey, we've moved to a Kinsey, figure it out, right?
Well, and I think that's the answer. Part of the reason we have the twin row planter is simply for beans and corn stalks. We'll use it anywhere, but that would be the primary purpose. And I see a lot of guys do a good job with drills in corn stalks. I never liked the look of corn or beans that had to come up on the corn rows. With the drill planting every. Now, there's certain things you can do. You 15-inch beans, you're still going to hit that corn row some most of the time. But if you guys have set some of their drills up using them as a twin row drill and planting in between, and that would be a positive. If we were using the drill in corn stalks, that's probably the approach we would try. We do use the drill occasionally in beans, following wheat, and then the old cover crop. And that goes back into beans. And I know we push the rotation a little hard. We like bean acres. What we really like about corn going into bean ground is we're not dealing with wheat residue in corn. Soybeans seem to be able to handle our wheat residue because we keep the straw a little better than corn in the spring. And we found that time and time again. We've planted some corn after the wheat and the oats cover crop and straw left, but there's spots, and again, even the best residue spread is still just not so good residue spread some of the time.
So now you've left the wheat straw because you're a big proponent of not baling it off but leaving it for the organic matter, right? And then you're going into beans. So let's talk about this Kuhn piece of vertical tillage equipment that you've got over here, and tell me your feeling about that piece of equipment. So Rob, we're in front of this Kuhn here now, a newer machine for you. You had the previous model before. Now, when do you run this machine?
Well, I'll address the part that we had one before, and like the basic machine, they made about 4 or 5 changes to it. I think we had the other one for 8 years, and then this one, and went back to the same machine, which is not what usually happens in today's world. There's all sorts of vertical tillage machines, and I think that label is a little broad anymore.
It is.
This is so-called vertical tillage because it doesn't have big angles on the disc or concaves. We use this after wheat stubble with the straw.
To work in the residue.
And plant the oats, and it works the oats in for cover crop as well. So one pass does the sort of mix the residue with the oats, and then we have our cover crop in as well. And then we use it in the spring. There's 2 things we use it for. We incorporate lightly the fertilizer before corn. So the broadcast fertilizer is incorporated lightly before corn, one pass. Shallow, which incorporation is debatable. How much? But it's.
But you're going shallow, right?
Yes.
I mean,
it's not deep. No, we never go below seedbed depth. We always try and stay above that. And then the spring, before putting the beans in the wheat stubble, when we go back to beans, we also will run it lightly again. And we've debated whether or not to do that or not. It works, and we always say we're going to try and leave some and not do that and see how it is strictly stale seed bed.
But you're like everybody else. So once you start, where do you stop?
It's a great winter idea. But comes spring, and sometimes simpler is better, you think, just to keep going.
And it is a beautiful piece of equipment in terms of the length. I mean, that must do something to how the residue flows. We've got some finger tines here. And so what are they in there for?
Well, I just call them deflectors. I think they help because the stuff that comes, the residue coming off the front, is in the air. This gets everything down before it gets to the back, of course, because we're running about 8 miles an hour, and it makes it sort of. I think it helps with the job. The discs are also offset now. They're narrower on the front between spacing than they are at the back, which means it can't track. It can't just follow. It can't follow its own groove, so to speak, which occasionally happened with the old one, but probably was happening more than we knew a little bit, because this seems to mix better again as well.
So when we look at the back of this machine, we've got these. What did you call these? These are the rolling.
I call them star wheels.
Star wheels.
And I think that's what the company calls them, but we're going to call them star wheels.
Okay.
And we run them with very little down pressure, actually essentially none, just at their own weight. You could put down pressure on them, but because we are going so shallow, we try and not put a lot of pressure on them. They do a great job, but another rolling harrow might do as well. I don't know.
Well, I noticed, I mean, it has another nice rolling basket at the back.
Yes, and the rolling basket used to have flat, and now they're round bar. They used to be flat bar.
Yeah. But now you can't adjust the pressure on those, though.
No, they just
on the spring.
They just do their thing and bobble along. We now have more adjustment hydraulically. It used to be manual. That's nice for an old guy like me. And we also have wing down pressure that is not a shear pin anymore. So it's all hydraulic backflow. So it keeps it at the wings are held so they can float.
So you made the comment earlier to me that in an ideal world, we would we wouldn't do any tillage.
No.
Right? I mean, what did you mean by that? And if that's true, why do you have this piece of equipment here?
Well, in my previous life, I became convinced that in a perfect world, no-till would be the answer.
Right.
The problem is we don't live in a perfect world, and dealing with higher crop yields, more residue, we sort of need to play with what we call no-till. Our only no-till piece of equipment is our drill and our planter. What we do in between to manage residue, we use this machine on the wheat stubble. And it's only used basically in the wheat crop and before corn, simply to incorporate some of the broadcast fertilizer. And we like it. I think all machines can do some of what you want very well, and they do some of what you want maybe not quite as well as you'd like. So people change machines. I don't think you find your answer by changing machines.
Is it fair, though, to say that your overall philosophy is to use as little tillage as necessary, but here we go, you do feel that some is necessary in your cropping system?
Is
that fair?
Yes, Horst. In order to maintain the yields levels we like to see, we need to always be cognizant of the residue and try and either mix it in a little bit, especially in the wheat and straw in the summer with the oats. And the oats cover crop also helps the breakdown. It does disappear fairly well in the course of a year. But we play with it a little bit. I would love to do none. I mean,
ideally, sure.
Yes.
Who doesn't want to just drive in and plant?
Well,
ideally.
I don't need more seat time at this time in my life.